All right, welcome back to Playing Sports. Today, the offensive lines in the SEC. We've done position group breakdowns for two groups so far, quarterbacks and running backs. This time we're talking about the big boys in the middle, protecting those quarterbacks and opening spaces for those running backs. And I think Oklahoma in our rankings are fairly put where they are, but I'm sure if someone is watching that isn't an Oklahoma fan, it's probably going to say we're being homers. And maybe some people that are Oklahoma fans are saying that we're doubting the players that are coming in or Coach B, what have you. Let us know your opinion. I think these videos are fun for us because we do get to interact with you guys a little bit more rather than recruiting videos that everyone in this podcast world seems to do. This is a little bit more fun because it is a little bit more conversational with the people, you guys watching. Before we get into everything, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when we're posting new videos. We're dropping 2 a week. So make sure to turn those on because we will do some recruiting here and there as some news comes up. But like I just mentioned, there's about a million other podcasts that will do. Feel free. Let's get into this. So, again, Oklahoma or O-line breakdown for the entire SEC. We're going to start at the back, go to the top. Number 1, or I guess number 16 for us was pretty simple. Vandy. I mean, it's Vanderbilt, and I guess that might be a cop-out. Some people will say that they're better than they're just Vanderbilt, but even if they have one or two guys that are pretty good, it's not going to be enough to make them jump up, maybe even higher than 15. Really, if you want, after you guys hear who number 15 is for us. But in Brandon, I think we kind of agreed here when we were talking about this list of offensive line. It's 16, 15, and 14 were pretty easy for us to rank here.
I mean, yeah, the poor Commodores come in last or near the last, I think, in every single one we've done so far. I know they were, I think I'd have to go back, but last at quarterback and either 15 or 16 at running back. And I feel like every time you do one of these breakdowns, they're going to find themselves there. And they were a 2-10 program last year, so like they're 2-10 for a reason, right? I mean, there's not a wealth of talent coming out of that football program, unfortunately for them. They're bringing in two dudes, one from Mississippi State, one from UTEP, decent transfer prospects, Stephen Loyosoya and Stephen Hubbard from UTEP. So I mean, they're trying, but they're 2-10. They're Vanderbilt. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that's where they're gonna find themselves here.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle for them. But, I mean, at the end of the day, and we talked about it, like it's not that they have bad players or players that maybe one day won't make it. There's guys that might make it to the NFL one day, but it is just a handful of guys out of that program that'll get to that level of play, and they might not even graduate from there unless they're like focused on academics or something while they're also playing football. More than likely going to hit the portal at some point because tampering, or they decide they just want to go somewhere else, what have you. That's just the case for Vandy. 15, South Carolina. Again, pretty simple for us. As much as we love Coach Beamer, since he is someone that has been here in Norman before, that offensive line has not been very good for him since he started there. Last year, I really thought they would make some sort of step up for Spencer Rattler in his last year. They have been recruiting that position decently well. For whatever reason, things just are not being put together to a point where you're thinking that quarterback is going to be protected well enough to throw the ball. I mean, Spencer Rattler, you and I think agree here, like probably one of the more talented guys. He has his flaws, but he can, if you give him enough time, he can put the ball basically wherever he wants. But they just never gave him enough time. Brandon, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, yeah, exactly. They started a true freshman last year at tackle. He got roughed up a little bit. Can't think of his name at the moment, but he had, a couple false start penalties, gave up 4 or 5 sacks in the year, I think is what I read. But, he started as a freshman, so he's only going to get better, I think. That's their left tackle. Again, yeah, I mean, don't know much about the rest of their line. I think they're returning a lot of most of the guys from last year, but as you talked about, Spencer was constantly under duress. I think there's a lot to figure out there in South Carolina. I do hope so for Shane Beamer. Like you said, we definitely are Beamer fans still. I think he's still, a pretty solid coach. We'll see what happens, but they're just it's a loaded conference at every single, every team pretty much is loaded. You have your Vanderbilts of the world and stuff, but in such a stacked conference with a lot of talent, that's just unfortunate where they find themselves.
Yep. Moving on to 14, Mississippi State, headed by former Oklahoma State offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby. Uh, oh, Mississippi State just wasn't a very good team over the last couple of years, and he's got a lot of rebuilding to do. It's not like Brent Venables rebuilding or really many other coaches rebuilding situations. Like he's got to build from bad to hopefully not as bad for him, but and he also runs a really fast system. Can these offensive linemen, are they in good enough shape to keep up? It's not just are they talented enough. Like you got to be in shape to play for Jeff Lebby. So that's basically it's just a lot of question marks there for Mississippi State.
I think they find themselves they're having a similar issue that we did. They lost a lot and they're taking a lot of transfers. Two of their starting five are projected to be transfer players. Michaelan Pounders from Memphis and Jacoby Jackson out of Texas Tech and North Texas. So I mean they've got a lot of new faces as well. You mentioned Jeff Lebby's offense, the way it runs. It's going to be a learning curve for some of these guys, I imagine. Just a lot going on for Vanderbilt there. I think again the talent of this conference kind of drops them to where they are.
And out of 13, Arkansas, headed by Coach Sam Pittman, somehow still has a job. But that guy is going into what feels like his 1 millionth season to lead a team that can't figure things out for whatever reason. Offensive line is not a strong suit for Arkansas this year. Coming in at 13 on our list, I think they're having to do a lot of rebuilding again. I mean, you bring back a former head coach to be your offensive coordinator in Arkansas. You've got something, so new offense for these guys. For anyone returning, you got a transfer quarterback. Hey, Arkansas's got a lot of things to figure out. I think if we were to do a hot seat or a head coach ranking at some point in this series, Pittman's going to be towards the bottom because might be on the hottest of hot seats when you look at coaches around the country in all the power conferences. So Arkansas 13, not a great look to start the season. Maybe he can prove us wrong.
Yeah, they were 114th in pressure rate last year, offensive line wise. So that's not very good. Obviously, they got a couple transfer guys coming in. They've got a couple guys that have been there, Josh Braun and Patrick Kudas, who look to be solid players here, but that's only 40% of the offensive line. Pittman, I don't think he's great. I agree with you. Maybe on the hot seat type situation there for him. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough for a lot of these programs, and I think you've thrown Sam Pittman here on the hot seat kind of. While recording, and I think off recording, Shane Beamer. He may have said the while recording. I can't remember now, but Beamer's also one that you talked about in the hot seat. So we got two coaches here that are on the hot seat. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It might be it. You know what? Now that we're talking about it, we're probably going to do that video at some point in this series because I think it is interesting. Some of these guys might be able to buy themselves a year with some staff moves that they make later on or before the season starts. But right now we're talking about offensive linemen. So moving on to number 12, Ole Miss, led by Lane Kiffin, doing a lot of replacement, similar to Oklahoma. He went into the portal, got what he could. What he hopes is also enough to keep that Ole Miss team to live up to the expectations that they have for the 2024 season. I think at this point, while they might not be the favorites to win the SEC, they might be the dark horse, the least dark horse of all dark horses in all of college football because of how well they did in the transfer portal and getting big names, i.e. Walter Nolan, probably being the biggest of names that was in the transfer portal this offseason. Being able to land him, you bring back your quarterback. They did lose their starting running back to Ohio State, and Ohio State is loading up. That is a conversation for another day. But right now, Lane Kiffin is trying to live up to expectations and protect his quarterback so that they can. I don't know. I mean, at this point, like Brandon said, over the last couple of teams, everyone else is so stacked. It might just be that these guys are going to have to prove themselves, similar to a couple of these other teams that are coming up on this list. So Ole Miss right now lands at 12 for us.
Yeah, no, I mean 100%. They're a team that's weird because like if you look at the rest of the roster, as you kind of like you were alluding to, we've talked about going through some of our breakdowns. The rest of their roster is national championship type players, the guys that you can win the whole thing with. This team was not very good offensively on the line last year. 73rd in pressure rate here. So Jackson Dart's he's under duress a lot. They're bringing back two dudes on the line. Their center and a guard here who kind of got bullied a little bit last year. They can always take the jump, but it's going to be tough. They're bringing some transfer guys in. I think they're very similar to us in that regard that we talk about all the time. I think this Oklahoma team can go as far as the offensive line allows. And, I think we're in a little bit better spot than Ole Miss there, but both us and Ole Miss are going to be as far as the O-line takes them.
Yeah, but we're kind of in that spot right now. So we'll see what happens with Ole Miss. Moving on to number 11, Texas A&M comes in at 11 for us. Brand new head coach, brand new offense, brand new defense, brand new everything. And I think when you look at what they have on the roster, they have definitely underperformed to the talent level on that team. Um, but now they're in a position where they have to do everything. They're learning everything again. And to start off the year, and maybe it's because we're a little pessimistic because of how Oklahoma did, but it's also how traditionally most schools do when they start off with a brand new everything. They take kind of a dip in the expected performance. So A&M comes in at number 11 for us because we just, even though they do bring back their left tackle and Trey Zune, the rest of the line, it wasn't too par with him, and still a little bit inexperienced to have some newer faces that haven't played a ton of football for him, and Chase Pasantis, which is a guy Oklahoma fans are very familiar with, and Cam Dewberry on the right side of the line. But again, not playing very much football there yet on their part, so some learning for Texas A&M's offensive line to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're at 11 for us, for me, because I'm not going to trust anything A&M does as far as much talent they have on that team, because they do. They're loaded with talent on paper, but they always seem to be loaded with talent on paper. And they always underperform. I know Jimbo was at the helm for a long time for a lot of that, so maybe Mike Elko will get in there and eventually right the ship down there in Aggie land. But like you're saying, I don't see it happening in year one. He's going to have some learning curves. The players are learning a new system that he's installing. Just it's hard. It's hard to do it in year one. I think Texas A&M, they consistently and always underperform. I don't see it changing. I think 11's fair for them. The talent's there, but it's A&M. I feel like you could put Tom Brady at quarterback and they'd find a way to lose 4 games.
Yeah, prime Tom Brady too. So
Yeah,
they're in a position where they've got to prove it at this point. Um, Moving on to number 10 for us is Oklahoma. Again, like I said at the top of the video, some people that don't like Oklahoma or believe themselves to be more objective when it comes to college football might think this is too high, and others that are big OU fans or might also think they're more objective in this position group breakdown might think this is too low for Oklahoma. But when you look at the rest of the SEC, Oklahoma is having to replace every starter. While they do have guys that have been on that roster for a while, you don't know if they're going to start. You have Big Sexy that's coming back from injury. And I think personally could play a big role for Oklahoma. But none of these guys have played as a unit together. And I think that's the biggest question mark. If anything, I would say we have Oklahoma at 10 because you always have to trust Coach B. Maybe he's not always putting out Joe Moore award-winning lines out there, but he's never putting lines out there that are putting the quarterback in a position where they have 0 seconds to throw the ball. Eventually, they might not start off the hottest, but by the time it comes to game 3, 4, 5, like they're looking like a pretty cohesive unit for the most part.
exactly. No, I was going to say, I just shit on Texas A&M for constantly under delivering and stuff. And, to be fair, I think under the previous regime, there's been a lot of moments where I thought Oklahoma should have finished a lot higher, and we kind of choked it away ourselves here. So, but the one consistent on that on Oklahoma, it seems no matter how good or bad or whatever the team is, as Bill Bedenbaugh always has those guys ready to go. And you did bring a lot of decent talent over. You got Michael Tarquin, the USC transfer. I think he's end up starting at one of the at left tackle. I do think you start sexy there at left guard. Center, you bring in a guy, Branson Hickman, who didn't allow a sack in 25,000 snaps. Obviously that's not the real number, but it's a large number. Fabechi, I'm not his name. I'm gonna
No way you.
no way I'm gonna mess it up. Yeah, but he's a guy who's very experienced in South Latrell's offense. And then you got Spencer Brown, the Michigan State transfer, who I think is going to start the season at right tackle, but Big J Taylor's right there too. A guy who's been in the system for two or 3 years now. He's going to have the experience there as an advantage over Spencer Brown. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being the right tackle. But yeah, I mean, I think they obviously haven't played together as a unit, but 3 or 4 of those guys have been on the same team, and I'm sure running practice snaps together. Heath Ozai to Josh Bates, guys like that. So where there's no real life fire game experience that they have together, I mean, they've been together for a decent amount of time. And Bill Bedenbaugh is, he's unquestionable. He's one of the best. He's one of the best position coaches in all of college football. He has been forever. He's a Joe Moore award-winning coach at the offensive line. He's always going to have that offensive line at least competent. And like you said, it might not always start great, but they always seem to find a way to get it rolling.
Yep. So moving on to number 9, Kentucky. Probably one of the teams that has the most returning players at that offensive line position. So you assume they continue to improve, are pretty good. They bring back probably the most experienced player in the country at any position, and Marquise Cox playing tackle going into his 6th year. This guy, I hope, is getting a doctorate degree at this point because he is well on his way for it. And then also three more returning starters there for him. They do have a brand new quarterback, so while it's not completely going to be not a lot of mistakes maybe early on in the year might be on them. Maybe Brock, who knows? You don't really know what you have with Brock as long as he doesn't hold on to the ball too long. That line could start shooting up in the rankings as the season progresses because they are very experienced. They know how to play with each other. You have to trust Coach Stoops there. So Kentucky comes in at number 9 for us.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Kentucky has their holes. They have their issues, but I don't think the offensive line's one of them. You look at their stats from last year. They put up 340 yards a game on offense, and that's better than most college football teams. They find themselves like 58 out of 135 or whatever. So they're not a horrible spot, but they averaged 128 yards a game on the ground last year, and at 4.9 yards a carry, which is obviously that's my favorite stat, and that's a half a first down per carry there. So that's real solid. They're experienced. You got to trust Mark Stoops there, as you said. Not a bad unit there for Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting with Kentucky is like you said, like they have their holes, but they also have spots on that team that they're not terrible. So it's really can they figure it out? Because if anything, their holes right now are just gigantic question marks, and mainly their quarterback because you don't know with what that guy is.
Yeah, they were a 7-win team last year. I feel like as we move into the SEC now, this Kentucky team is going to remind me of they're going to be the Kansas State of the SECs to us. Teams like that are just never quite fun to play.
Yeah, they're that team that can be the heartbreak kids, and they're gonna put a big stop to any sort of run that any team is on, not just Oklahoma. And if anything, I think Kentucky really has been that team. They have some high expectations going into the year, but they usually underperform. But they will show up for games that they have no business playing well in. But yeah, Kentucky at number 9 on our list. Moving on to number 8, Tennessee, led by former Oklahoma quarterback Josh Heupel. Tennessee is coming into the season with a new quarterback, just like Oklahoma, and it's maybe not the same question marks as Oklahoma with their offensive line because they do have more highly touted players at the offensive line position. And they also have a play caller that is maybe more trusted at this point when you look at the SEC and college football and Josh Heupel. So you know that he understands how to how to help coach up a line and make them look good, make their quarterback look good throughout the season. So Tennessee, I think at this point you bring in their a former 5-star in Lance Hurd transferring from LSU, so that helps a lot in boosting what that potential of that offensive line can be. But bringing having Josh Heupel there to help uh, with that offense and being the play caller for that offense puts Tennessee in a spot where maybe they're higher ranked than some would like them to be, but you got to trust what the product has been on the field for the last few seasons.
Yeah, no, exactly. That offense is humming. You know, they averaged about 450 yards a game last year, 200 of which came on the ground, and they also averaged about 5 yards per carry. Josh Heupel knows what he's doing there. He's got the guys that clearly the system works. The guys know what they're doing. They're putting up yards on offense. They're going to be consistently a tough out every year in and year out. That's not going to change. I think, you know, right in the middle of the road there for that offensive line is a perfect landing spot for them. They're not, you know, they're not your Georgias or your LSU offensive line, but they are not even close to Vanderbilt or South Carolina. You know, they're right in the middle there. They're tough, not great, not bad. They're solid, and they're going to put up yards. They're going to get shit done.
Yep. Moving on to 7, Florida. Coming in at 7, I think maybe not their pass protection so much at this point, given that they came in at 115th in sack rate, but they were able to help create a good run game for Billy Napier and the Florida team. Last year, Trevor Etienne had a pretty decent season. Don't have the stats right in front of me right now, but given that he was the highly touted running back in the portal that ended up in Georgia, you know that that offensive line had something to do with it, because as a running back, you don't succeed without a good offensive line in front of you, no matter how talented you are. I think Florida can repeat that kind of performance in the run game. The biggest question mark for them is, can they improve in the pass game? They have their returning quarterback in Graham Mertz, who feels like he's also been in college football for a million years. I think he graduated high school with us back in 2014 and 2013. It feels like, at least. Well, obviously,
Something
that's
like
not the
that.
case,
Yeah.
but you know, they have something to to build on, but they also have something that they've shown they're pretty good at in creating lanes for their running back.
Yeah, I mean, Trevor Etienne rushed for 753 last year, but didn't have very many carries, like 121, 130, something like that. So he averaged 5.4 yards a carry, and Montrell Johnson was the leader there, over 800 yards, but also an over 5 yards a carry guy. I mean, that's real consistency. There's a lot of lanes opening up. Those guys can't do it on their own, as you mentioned. So, you know, decent system there. They're running the ball well. Yeah, Graham Mertz wasn't great, and their pressure rate there for him wasn't great. So I don't know if that was him holding on to the ball very much. I still don't trust Graham Mertz. I don't think he's fantastic. So it could be a mixture of both. You know, the offensive line letting people through, and Graham Mertz kind of holding on to it too long. You know, they were a 5-1 team last year, so a lot of holes, but it's not the offensive line.
Yeah, I get Florida as a team is really kind of just a gigantic question mark, because after I don't even remember who their last coach was, but it seems like every Florida fan hated their previous coach. They bring in Billy Napier because he succeeded at Louisiana.
I think so. Smaller
I
school. Hold
believe.
on. I'll find it.
Um, and now that he's at Florida, basically since the moment he stepped on that campus, it's been Billy Napier kind of sucks. He's too much of a hard ass. These guys don't want to play for him. There's a whole bunch of different narratives for Florida, it seems like, throughout the media. So Florida, they have the talent. It's, can they put it together and look like a competent football team? We'll see. Moving on to number 6. If you do find who he used to coach for,
You're right. He was at Louisiana as the head
Louisiana.
man for 2018 to 2021.
Yeah, that sounded right. Glad I didn't fuck that one up. Excuse me. Sorry for cussing. Number 6, Missouri. Coming into the season, as much as we may not like saying this, they are one of the more highly touted teams in the SEC, returning their quarterback, returning what could be the best wide receiver in the country in Luther Burden. bring back talent in the portal, or bring talent in from the portal in Caden Green, former Sooner, SMU guard, I believe. I can't remember his name right now for some reason. Let me look it up real quick. Unless you have it in front of you.
I'm looking at their offensive stats last year, and the
Sorry,
guys are bringing back. Yes,
Marcus
they're
Bryant.
loaded.
Marcus Bryant. To remember that. But they brought in talent through the portal. They have guys returning. I think the reason they're at 6 for us, as we talked about before we started recording, they're replacing their left tackle, who was just drafted in like the third round in the NFL, Javon Foster. Guy was considered to be one of the better tackles in this year's draft. So you're having replaced probably the most important guy on your offensive line, and you're trying to replace him with what is suspected to be Caden Green, who, as Oklahoma fans know, he is a very promising guard. At least that's what Oklahoma had wanted him to play and has had put him in a position to play. If they do kick him out to tackle, he becomes a question mark because you don't really know if he has the athleticism to play left tackle at the collegiate level. He might, and I know people are going to say that it just sounds like we're hating on the kid, but going from guard to tackle, most people that will have coached football at a high level or talk about football at a high level, played football at a high level, regardless of position, will say like going from guard to tackle is a very big difference. The level of athleticism that that is needed is different. So again, not that Caden can't do it, but now that blind side for your quarterback becomes a question mark because you don't know if you can 100% trust that guy like you did Javon Foster in previous years.
I think Caden Green will have some lumps and stuff, but he does have experience playing both guard and tackle. I mean, granted, not at the SEC level. He did a little bit in high school, but Caden Green's good. I mean, as much as we, it sucks that he left, and we all have our own opinions on him now. The kid is good. It's unfortunate what happened there that he left. I would have loved to have Caden Green as our lone returner this year. I think he would have set the tone really well for us, but it is what it is. It's over now. But I think for Missouri, man, you mentioned it. I mean, they're an 11-win team last year who brings back almost everybody. They're bringing their quarterback back. They've got Luther Burden, who, as much as this sucks too, he's arguably one of the best receivers in college football, if not number one. Theo Weiss is a very solid guy out there, both, with Sooner ties. Theo Weiss obviously played for us. Luther Burden committed for a while. Their running back last year, and this is, kudos to the offensive line. But, yeah, Cody Schrader, if you look at his numbers, man, he had over 270 carries, but he averaged almost 6 yards a carry for like over 1,600 yards. I mean, this offense it's bananas all around. And when you're that talented on offense everywhere, it's going to help everybody out, offensive line included. They can run, they can pass. So those big boys up front can kind of get a break sometimes. It's hard to know as a defense if you're going to pass rush or try to, it's hard to stop that offense, as unfortunate as that sounds, because I do not like Missouri at all. I hope they're awful.
Well, outside of that, because I do agree, at the end of the day, they're a good team, and the biggest question mark is their left tackle. Can they replace their very experienced, very good collegiate left tackle who just left for the NFL? That if they can, the offensive line should be just fine. But that's why they're at number 6. Moving on to the top 5. At number 5, we have Auburn. Auburn, probably one of the better lines in the country, obviously at number 5, but they were able to create huge gaps there for their running backs in the run game. And honestly, they gave enough time to their quarterback for him to be successful. Their quarterback just straight up sucks. And that's not their fault. He can't put the ball in his receivers' hands, and when he could, sometimes the receivers had the case of the dropsies. Sometimes they caught it. It's really just a matter of the offense being better. But as an offensive line unit, they performed well. They were top 30 in pressure rate last year. So a group that can do their job. It's a matter of the rest of the guys around them making them look better. Because I'm sure some people that don't always watch Auburn football, which, I mean, we don't. We had to do a little bit of digging to figure out how good they really were. Probably thinking this team probably sucks because they don't give their quarterback enough time. It's the other way around. They're giving their quarterback enough time. It's the quarterback kind of letting them down. So hopefully
Yeah.
for their sake, they're getting a little bit better play this year.
Yeah, Peyton Thorne's not very good. And I think luckily for the rest of the SEC, because as you're talking there, that offensive line's a pretty solid group. They average about 5 yards a carry on the ground, almost 200 yards rushing on the ground, but they pass for about 160 every game, which is, it might sound like a decent number, but 160 is not very good in the grand scheme of things for college football team. That's why they win 6 games. If they can bring Cam Newton back on this offense, they're going to be a lot better than 6 wins as they were last year. So they've, I think, similar to Kentucky, they have holes, but it's definitely not that offensive line unit.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on to number 4, Alabama. I'm sure if this was under Nick Saban, we'd probably be putting him a little bit higher, maybe top 2, top 3. But at number 4, it's Alabama under Kalen DeBoer. He's recruiting well. You just don't know what it's going to be like. At Washington, he had a good offensive line. He brought some guys over from Washington. He ended up bringing back Caden Proctor, the detriment of Iowa fans. I'm sure they're not the biggest Caden Proctor, Kalen DeBoer, Alabama supporters at this point. But you bring back quite a bit of talent. They didn't lose too much on the offensive line unit. You bring in some guys that were there with him at Washington. You expect that line to be one of the better lines in the country now that they're more experienced, that you have guys back. Some of the guys that are coming to Washington know the offense, know how Kalen DeBoer likes them to play. So this Alabama offensive line, I don't think is going to be bad at all. It's just a matter of, it's not Nick Saban, so maybe not top 3, but it's still going to be damn good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to say much more than that. I mean, at the end of the day, they are still Alabama until we see otherwise. I like to believe they're still going to be solid. They're going to be solid, sound, strong at every position. They're always going to be tough. Sure, they have an awesome recruiting class at almost every position. They're not too far removed from being the greatest dynasty we've seen in college football. Georgia's looking for that title now, or what they're doing, but they're not far removed from that. They've still got guys. They're still going to be tough. I think they have. I think the reason they didn't win last year is might be a controversial take. Jalen Milroe to me is not elite. He can be, and then sometimes he struggles, and I think that hurts him. And I think they ran a terrible play call on that 4th and goal or whatever it was in the playoff game with the game on the line. That was it was shut down immediately. But they elected to run a quarterback draw there, and I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is. Just tangent there, but yeah, I think that's the reason why Alabama didn't. Because if they beat that Michigan team, I think they smoke Washington. If the national title game has anything to do with how that game goes,
Possibly would have been a good way to go out there for Coach Saban. But moving on to number 3, we have the mighty Georgia Bulldogs. Really, at this point, seems to be the new top dog of the SEC. Georgia's bringing back quite a bit of talent as well. Mainly their guards and Tate Rutledge and Dylan Fairchild, 2 of the better offensive linemen, just straight up offensive linemen, not just guards as a whole in the country, especially in the SEC, coming back for their 5th years. Still have returning left tackle, who if really anyone at this point doesn't trust that Georgia's going to develop their players, you're just hating on what Georgia's been doing, because they're clearly developing their players at every single position. They come in at number 3 because the 2 teams at 1 and 2 have just too much returning proven talent already, that it didn't make sense for us to put Georgia at 3, even though we know Georgia in the top 2, because even though we know Georgia's going to be probably a top 2 team, if not the best team in the country, and especially the SEC when it's all said and done.
100%. And I think every list we go on, Georgia's going to find themselves in the top 3 or 4. I don't think they've been outside of that in any of our current lists that are out there, and I don't expect that to change. There's a reason that they're winning as many games as they are and building this dynasty that is rivaling what Alabama did, not so long ago. You mentioned the 2 guards there, Dylan Fairchild and Tate Rutledge, studs. Obviously they're going to be good, but they had the 4th best pressure rate in all of college football last year. That's a solid number. They're returning a lot of guys. And at the end of the day, I mean, they're just Georgia. You've got to expect they've got 4 or 5-star offensive linemen waiting in the wings. And Kirby Smart's been there for a long time. He knows what he's doing. He's building a very, very successful program. They're going to be tough. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia is Georgia at this point. Well, just like the sentiment that we all used to have about Bama, Georgia is Georgia.
Yeah, they've taken it.
Yep. Moving to number 2, Texas. I mean, they're returning a ton of talent. Probably one of the best, if not the best, left tackle in the country in Kelvin Banks. I think really they're only replacing one guy, which is their right tackle. Which, if you ask Texas fans, probably the worst offensive lineman they had last year because of how many holding calls were called on that guy. So I'm sure some people are happy to see a new face at that right tackle position. So Texas returning so much talent. Sark is a great play caller, like it or not, as OU fans. He does know how to call an offensive football game. I still think Oklahoma can win in that game every year because at the end of the day, rankings don't matter. It's what happens on the field there, as we all know. But that Texas offensive line is too good. There's too much returning talent to objectively not put them at number 2 here for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we realistically could have put them at 1, but I think that Crimson and Cream that we bleed is just never going to ever allow that to happen for us to throw them into a top spot. But they're loaded. They've got Jake Major coming back at center, who's one of the most experienced centers in college football. Really good in both the pass and the run game. They're a tough out. But I mean, again, like you said, this is not at all to say Oklahoma can't beat them because, I think on paper last year they were better than us, and we game planned it up and beat them. It is what it is. We're never gonna, except for the 49-0 year, which thank God I wasn't there for. We're never gonna play that poorly against them. It's always going to be a game we're in. I think we're just as good as Texas, almost at every position. We can have just as good a season. They're tough. But I think, like you talked about over the 4th of July week when we were together, they have this window, and it's pretty much this year. If they don't make some serious noise this year, they're kind of going to – I'm not going to say go back to the Texas of old, the 6-win program, but they're not going to be as tough. This is their window right here. It was last year and kind of this year.
Yeah, and it's kind of their put up or shut up year. I know they have Arch coming in, obviously, as their starting quarterback in the 2025 season, or at least that's expected. You never know with the transfer portal era now, but he hasn't left at this point. You don't expect him to leave in the future. But they have so much talent right now, especially at the offensive line, that it should be offensively the best spot they're in quite some time. But that's a topic for another day. We can talk about where the Oklahoma Texas rivalry for forever. Moving into number 1, LSU. I think clearly the number 1 offensive line here in the SEC. Runners up for the Joe Moore Award last year, bringing back, I believe, almost every single starter, having one of the better tackle combos, Will Campbell and Emory Jones there in Baton Rouge. LSU, while they did lose quite a bit of talent, because I still stand by that statement from when we did our wide receiver rankings, especially, and then obviously replacing their quarterback. Their offensive line, like many or a few of these other teams, is not one of the holes or question marks that this team has. If anything, that is the best unit that this team has, and needs to rely on them early in the season to start getting into a groove for conference play.
100%. I mean, the question marks on this LSU team is definitely not the offensive line. You mentioned being finalists for the Joe Moore Award last year. Both those tackles, Campbell and Jones, are projected first-round talents, so they're obviously studs. They've got the offensive line figured out. Their question mark definitely lies at quarterback. They're bringing in, or I don't know if you played there last year, Garrett Nussmeier. I don't he's average. They're losing. They lost Malik Neighbors. Yeah, they lost a lot of skill position, but they are definitely the big boys up front are not going to be the issue in Baton Rouge, and that's it's not a bad place to rebuild. If you have I'd rather lose skill positions than lose an offensive line of that caliber that LSU has. I mean, they should be able to, in theory, be able to run the ball if they can't pass it, and the run game sets up everything. So I mean, LSU is that offensive line is going to, I think, win them a lot of games, or it's going to be a big reason for the games that they do win.
Definitely. That's everything for this video, 1 through 16. Tell us what you think about these rankings. I'm sure many will disagree because it hasn't really been full agreement in the comment section.
That's perfect, though. You
Just
should
let us
agree.
know. Make sure to leave a comment. Uh, from if you're in the live chat during the premiere, go to the comment section. We disrespect Coach B. Go to the comment section. Let us know. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video. We will be doing more of these position breakdowns throughout the rest of the offseason. We are not very far away from college football starting. It's next month.
It's next month.
Soon enough, we will be watching real college football. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about where these teams rank as position groups. So it's going to be fun. We talked about it earlier in the video. Probably going to end up doing a coaching one later in this series. So make sure to turn on the notification bell and follow us on all social media, Apple Podcasts, Spotify if you prefer to listen. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.